Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford. I'm the creator of ComicBase, and I get into a few other things, but not sure if any of those are interesting today. Anyway, welcome. For the next hour or so, we'll be talking about all things comics and ComicBasey related. We'll be covering a little bit of pop culture news and also some tech news, but more importantly, we'll be talking about tips to use ComicBase, particularly the newest version, our big quarterly, our fourth quarter update, ComicBase 23.1. How to use that to its best, and share some of the things that maybe will help you along. Hopefully will be news to a lot of you, and which will make a change. So anyway, if you have questions that you would like covered in the live stream, please post them in the chat to @ComicBaseTV. That helps me catch them as they all go scrolling by faster than I can keep up sometimes. And also want to thank our mod Greg Hectus in the house today to try to keep things online in case the spammers show up. Anyway, with that said and done, let's get to it. I want to say hey to everyone first. Oro's first in the chat from 46 degrees out here in Minneapolis. Man, beautiful. It's actually, I'm out here in Franklin, Tennessee, just outside Nashville myself, and it's unseasonably 65 degrees. We were freezing our butts off earlier this week, but and now it's another beautiful fall day. Who knew? Mike Beam, great to see you, man. Vancouver, man, beautiful town. Thomas B, Thanksgiving wishes. And let's see here, we get Tyler T from upstate New York. Whereabouts, man? I hailed from Ithaca for a number of years. My dad used to run the food service for Cornell University back in the day when I was very little, but I'm curious. Andre, great to see you, man. And there's our mod out there here from South Jersey. Let's see here. And Ora says, yes, but the snow. Buffalo, man, does Buffalo ever get the snow? And let's see here. The future Mrs. Comics ate my brain. That'd be our mod's Mrs. Mod, hosting Thanksgiving for both sides of the family for the very first time. I wish you a pleasant, joyous, and blood-free holiday, man. All right, well, and the scrolling is, sorry, I got to adjust my monitor here so it actually scrolls when I try to move things to the bottom here. That will help. Cat's pajamas. Who's from the north side of Franklin. Actually, yeah, he's just on the other side of town. And at some point, Cass PJ, I think I sent you a note about sales files on Atomic Avenue. If you still need help with that, reach out to me tomorrow. Not tomorrow. Reach out to me on Friday. We'll get that straightened out for you. And let's see here. Let's see. Galactus must be freed. All right. Jet City Comics. Great to see you, man. All right. Well, let's get down to it. So the big news of the week on the ComicBase front is ComicBase 23.1 is out here. Yes, I'm finally breaking from my dorkazoid engineering tradition of acting as if numbers are the most precious resource in the universe, and I never wanted to give up that first decimal after the major number unless it was a really special occasion. And I think we finally decided that for the quarterly updates, we're going to label them 23.1. 23.2, 23.3, and so forth until there is a 24 someday, hopefully. You guys are familiar with the ones that we're issuing all the time throughout the quarter, or usually they call it the build numbers, that fourth part of the version number. It's right now, I think it's somewhere in 2065 or so, which actually does mean that we have done 2065 builds of the product since we started. But those are changing all the time. But the big ones out here, 23.1 is where we're at right now. This is the big quarterly update of everything we've been doing since ComicBase 23 released about, oh gosh, it's only a little about 2 months ago. But man, oh man, we have done so much stuff. Big things that are of immediate use. First of all, in addition to just the content piece, I believe content-wise, we added something like 30,000 new comics. It's just, anyway, it's crazy how much content we've been pushing through. We've been averaging between 2,000 and 3,000 additions and corrections per day, 7 days a week. That is the rate that things are coming in. It's absolutely off the hook. So if you snooze at all, you are going to be you're missing a lot of stuff. So make sure you download those weekly updates. But in terms of the program features for ComicBase, the major ones, we have done some deep dredging with the Atomic Avenue folks, where we managed to make it so that we could download all your sales records using our new API that we introduced with ComicBase 2023. You can now download those into ComicBase all the way back to the beginning of Atomic Avenue's history. If you are, some of these ones, depending on how very long ago they are, might have a little trouble matching up with the exact database that you're matching up with. If you do have a problem where it warns you multiple times, do you want to incorporate old sales records? Reach out to us, support at comicbase.com, and give us the database ID number you'd like them to be matched into. You can get that under File. And this is in ComicBase. Go to File, Collection Statistics, and then click the database info icon of the database that you'd like to put it under. There's a very long hexadecimal number, which is your database identifier. And if you mail support at comicbase.com what database you'd like them pumped into, even those really old records, we'll be able to match them in for you there. But that could be a manual process depending on how far back you're going. So one little note on that one. Other things that are very interesting of the new release, we managed to make scrolling much faster, particularly for folks that have slower hard drives, so it'll feel a bit more responsive. That was like the one really bad thing about the new grid stuff we did here, is that it would draw the grids really, really quickly, and you could zip down the bottom and you'd see the pictures instantly. You wouldn't have to wait all day for them to populate. But if you were the type of guy who liked using like the mouse wheel to go scroll bit by bit by bit, it was the one thing that would really do in the new scrolling algorithm, especially if you had a slower hard drive. That's fixed now, and we managed to work around that, and so it should feel pretty good if you've been, if that hasn't been working for you. We have some new options in ComicBase and in ComicBase Sidekick for integrating your wish list a little better with Atomic Avenue, so you can find those books you've been looking for. And there's a lot of other stuff. Please do look at the release notes under the support section of ComicBase. For the current version, it'll list all the major changes that we've done. And if you're the kind of person who likes seeing all the little stuff that we do throughout the quarter, you don't want to just wait for the quarterly release, feel free to go under in ComicBase, go under Setup, and then in the Preferences, tell it to download or check for interim releases as well. And then you'll get to see all the little improvements we make as we go. If you don't mind, getting lots of updates, because we are working on the product all the time, and so we don't want it to be too troublesome for everyone. That's why we only push the forced update once a quarter. But if you do like seeing all the new stuff, that's the way to go. All right. I also, with my notes for myself here, I want to point out that the sales reporting has been quite a bit improved. There's some new keyboard shortcuts for bopping up and down in the list and making it easier to jump to particular issues, etc. And most of all, I wrote a note to myself, it's free. Yes, if you have a current version of ComicBase, ComicBase 23, if your subscription is current, you can just download it for free. You don't need to pay us anything extra. We just do all this stuff all the time just because we're trying desperately to make this the best product we can and keep up with this crazy comic market. And so as long as you've got that annual subscription in force there, you get all the new program updates we do, as well as the content updates, and they're all rolled in for one, all in for the same price. So just go to get the new update, just go under the internet menu in ComicBase, say check for updates, and you'll see that if you haven't updated to ComicBase 23.1 yet, you'll see that there's a new version. Do download and install that before you try to update new content, because we did add a bunch of new stuff, and once a quarter we make it so that if we've changed enough about the way the program works, we want to force you to get current with the program. So now we're trying to support 80 different versions of the program going backward, because that makes us crazy. We try to get everyone on the same page once a quarter, and so that's what this we call this a forced release is about. Is basically we make it so like if you want to get new content update, we need to get you on at least the basic version of the program everyone else is on, because otherwise it's very difficult from our end just to deliver the content. All right. Other things that are interesting in ComicBase world. We have a brand new database server. Now, if you're not a tech guy, this could be the most boring thing I say for the next minute or two, but it's a big deal for us, because one thing that we've been doing very steadily over the last couple of years is we've been taking on more and more work on the back end on our servers as far as managing people's collections. So for instance, the new mobile reports, or the new mobile application will now actually store a copy of your database on our server. So we expand, exponentially the amount of data we're storing, so that way, as you're browsing through on the mobile app, you can actually see what you've got in real time. You don't need to generate reports for it. We do a lot more work with automatic reporting with when you say save to cloud in ComicBase Sidekick, you can have it say, hey, by the way, while you're doing it, make me issue checklists and make me collection reports and do all this stuff. And some of you guys have some really big collections. So, so there's a lot of stuff going on our back end here. and also the amount of just load just from people hitting the site and browsing pictures and everything else. It's gotten to be quite difficult to scale that up for us, because we're trying to do we have some very buff servers were introduced a couple years, actually 13 14 months ago, but even those ones right there were starting to get loaded down to the point where every once in a while the system would become unresponsive. So we broke out a lot of the work, and we are shoving off onto a brand new hardware box, which is a monster. I mean, this thing has got like 120 gigs of RAM, and it's just it's a beast. It's honestly it's the fastest computer we know how to build for doing databasey things, and so that guy is doing a lot of the work now. So now our web servers have a lot easier time of it. The point then hopefully has become Atomic Avenue and ComicBase.com should have a much easier time of dealing with all the load without bogging down, having any kind of stability issues and so forth. And anyway, we're happy. It seems to be running pretty good. So knock wood, we hope we can continue to scale as we go and not have the kind of bottlenecks we've had in the past. So that got up this last weekend. And if you guys have any issues, please let us know at support@comicbase.com. The integration went pretty smoothly from our end, all things considered. There were one or two hitches, but it seems like it worked out. And anyway, let us know if you need anything or if you see anything that's acting a little weird for you. All right. And then the last bit of comic industry news is ComicBase was in the news this last week over in Sketched, SKTCHD. It's a site for talking about comic-based comic news. We had helped them with the research for the article that they just wrote on variants. Head on over there and check it out. SKTCHD. I'll try to put it in the show notes. A guy named David Harper wrote it. Really good article talking about the issue of variants, both from the customer standpoint, from the shop owner standpoint, and even from the creator standpoint, about how the trend is playing out and how what it kind of means to the people, the different players in the industry. And I thought he did a really good job of comics journalism, which is a sentence you hear almost never from me, because the state of comics journalism, let's face it, as Jean-Louis Gasset would say over at Apple, it could have been even better. Which means it sucks. It's just, there's way too much information about personalities and, petty fights and things like that, and way too little information about the data that drives the industry. And I think David did a really good and fair job of getting into the ins and outs of variants on the whole thing. So do check it out. It might be, depending on where you're at, it might be behind a paywall, but I would say definitely worth, giving a chance at donating to the site to see what's going on. There was a lot of other interesting content on the site as well. I got a kick in particular about there's apparently a feature on the site of going through different comic covers and say, well, what if the characters on the cover actually did what they're showing them doing? And they showed a cover of Punisher #1 where Frank Castle's got what was the model? It was basically a bazooka. He's hanging by one hand off of a rope on a fire escape, aiming a bazooka at point blank range into an apartment building with a bunch of thugs inside. And what if he'd actually fired? And the answer is nothing good would have occurred. But anyway, but yeah, it's good stuff. So check it out. All right, on to other things. The big tech news, and the only piece of tech news I want to cover this time out, is if any of you folks out there are using Windows 8.1 still, it is time to cut bait. Microsoft is going to be end-of-lifing it hard in January 10th, and they are not fooling around. They're not, they're not extending the support contract. They're not doing anything. Once January 10th rolls around, anything that's an unpatched vulnerability is going to go unpatched, which means, if the past is any guide, and it usually is, it means probably within a week or two there will be exploits out in the world that will let people own your machine that they will not be helping you with. 8.1 does not have a lot of fans out in the world, but if you somehow are on a machine that has 8.1 on it, it's time to get onto Windows 10 or later, because once they stop supporting it, it's all over for you. And I wouldn't put any data that I love on a machine that's still running that. So that is the news for then. All right, I've been chatting for a while, so let's talk out there. Oro asks, what was the CPU on the server? It's a 12th generation Intel 950. Not sure whether we're overclocking or not. I was checking the load on it, even under the stress testy just things that we knew how to throw on it, and I don't know if I've seen that thing get above 20%, in terms of what's got. The thing that really has helped on the new server is just having stupid amounts of RAM. So basically, we can carry the entire ComicBase database, or the backend database that it uses to manage all these things. It's almost all in RAM. It just because SQL Server, which is our backend platform, wants to use as much RAM as it can to optimize performance. And so if you just let it do its thing, it will just start sucking up RAM until it either has loaded everything it thinks it ever can load, or anything it even conceives of loading, or it starts running you down to your last meg or two of RAM. And with 128 gigs, the former occurred before the latter, and I'm very happy about that, because it just makes everything more stable. And again, it's easier to scale from there, because the database is always the thing that is the hardest to work in like a server farm kind of thing. I mean, if we needed to, we could throw 10 different web servers on the front end. That's relatively easy to do when you just your site, depending on how when you hit the site, you would get one of 10 at random or whatever else, and they could all be hitting the same backend database. The database is a bear to scale. I mean, it's so incredibly complicated from a backend to build those out, that until you get into very complicated and very expensive solutions, it's hard to have more than one machine running your database at once and get that going. But between shifting, the heavy loads, like the reporting utility, Jimmy, like Jimmy Olsen, the reporter, the guy who handles all the jobs that you guys send in when you do a save to cloud, and you say, like, build me all these custom reports. He's doing a fair amount of database grinding between loading up everyone's databases and then issuing pre-built reports and things like that. So there was just the ancillary things that were on formerly on the web servers, which are now shifted to the database server. Just taking that stuff off of the front end servers is just it's a big help. So anyway, we'll see how it goes. All right, let's see here. Greg says, speaking of the mobile app, any thoughts when the mobile app be able to display in from the book and magazine categories? It's not in the immediate future. It is something that the next time we touch the database, the mobile app, we'll probably be looking into. Right now, my time has been taken very, very seriously with infrastructure issues, with ops stuff, like stuff like that, and also working on some things that I want to see ComicBase and Atomic Avenue get done together. And so that's been my main focus right now. At some point I will get back to the mobile app, but it won't be right away. But I am aware that that's something that we'd like to see, and yeah, we'll get to it. You'll see more improvements to Atomic Avenue before you see more improvements to the mobile app, though. All right, let me see here. Steve Dassinger is helping folks out as usual. Excellent. Oh, and our mom wants to remind everyone, smash the like button. It does help. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do. It lets people know that this is an important thing. And so honestly, I really do want to grow the channel more in terms of providing non-live stream content. As we go forward, it blew my mind earlier today. Kind of a loose hour. It was like an hour that wasn't completely spoken for by 8 other tasks. And I thought, wow, if this is the sort of thing that could happen to me, I don't know, in my future at all, I would love to record videos for people, letting people know how to do different things in ComicBase. And I really hope that will happen more once we get done with this incredibly crushing workload that it seems like we're starting to see the other end of. But anyway, so that's about it. Oro asks, what was the date of the first live stream, please? It must be around 2 years. Good Lord, yes, it has actually been 2 years now. And if you dial back to the playlist for the ComicBase live streams, the first live stream has got me, I've got my COVID rocker hair, which is to say I look like a 1970s barely shaven bass player, who hasn't seen a barber in like 4 or 5 months. And I'm sitting there going like, is this my god? Doing that kind of stuff on the first live stream. But yes, that was basically 111 episodes ago, which is about 123 or 4 weeks ago, because we missed a couple weeks throughout, just because certain times we couldn't do a live stream, or life gets in the way, or there was Christmas or things like that. But yeah, stupid. I can't believe we've been doing this stuff this long. All right, so I think are we catching out here? Okay, and I think we are good. And Noah says he has a podcast called Off Panel with some great interviews. Good dude. All right, right on. All right, cool. All right, so let's get on to it. Tips. All right, guys, and let's see. And I gotta, you have to forgive me a little bit here. I am switching over here. I typically in recent weeks have had, and by the way, this is the article I was referring to from David Harper over at Skutched, SKTCHD.com. But yeah, do have a look at it. You guys have seen that graph before. He actually went and took the same data set and rolled it a couple of different ways. Some of the things that are really interesting is he basically ran the inversion of the number that we were talking about beforehand of variance over time. Variance is a percentage of total releases, which, if you guys hadn't heard the punchline on that one before, variance are now 77.81% of all comic books that are out there on the market. But he also said, all right, so what is the average number of variants per comic, which is another way of looking at the same data. And that's terrifying to me. There are now 3.5 variants for every regular comic book in the world today. It's like, good God. Anyway, the article goes on quite a bit, talking not just about the data, but also getting into the details from the different sales and consumer sides of things. And it's really interesting. It's a good long article, worth checking out. All right, let's get into it though. All right, so these are not necessarily the most important tips, but they're tips that not everyone knows, which tend to make your life much better if you know them. And hopefully some of them are new to folks who've been even watching most of the live streams here, and we'll get onto it. All right, so first one. All right, if you run more than one database, and I'm sorry, I was winding up to try to apologize in advance for something. I'm going to try, and this isn't going to work. So if I go and I try to magnify, unfortunately, because I've now got multiple monitors running out here, the magnification doesn't work when you have to cross monitors. It just doesn't. So if you don't see anything on the screen, I'll try to make large wavy signs against it here, but I can't do the usual thing I've been doing when I had a separate computer for this stuff here for another week or two until I get another machine in to do the live streams on it. But so I apologize for that, but I will try to make this as clear as I can. All right, if you go and you've been using multiple databases, you'll see here under recent databases, it'll list all the databases you've been using lately. Well, what if one of them was like a backup or something that you didn't really mean to open, you don't really care, and so forth. How do you get rid of it? Well, there's two ways. The old slow way is if you move that database someplace different from where it was last seen, so it's not at the same location it was remembered at. Then when ComicBase opens next time, it'll say, well, hey, I can't see some of your remembered databases, so I'll just lose them from the list. There's a quicker way though, which is, let's say I don't want to remember Master Comics database. Just go ahead and right click on it. It'll say, do you want to remove this from the list of recently opened databases? You click yes, boom, it's gone. And that'll let you trim your list there quite a bit. All right, on a similar note, if you've got databases in your mobile app that you want to get rid of, and let me go ahead and I'm going to open this one up. And we got to log in at comicbase.com, and just in case I have to put in my password, I'm going to do it when you guys aren't looking. Give me a second here. No, we are good. All right. All right, so here is my profile page at comicbase.com. If you've got databases showing in the mobile app and you don't want them, most importantly, the mobile app is really convenient if you're using one database and if that's your default. Otherwise, you got to tap that thing right at the top, and it's really annoying to keep on remembering that you got to switch databases before you see your stuff. Go to your profile section over at comicbase.com. Just comicbase.com, go to profile, scroll down to the bottom here, and it'll show you your known databases. So down at the bottom here, like for instance, I'm always opening up, stock databases and people's test databases. Go ahead and remove anything which isn't the database you want to see in the mobile app. And what it'll do there is it'll clear off any old reports that are stored under it, and so forth like that. But then next time you launch on the mobile app, it'll only show whatever your database is that you've got down here, at the top. So if I tell it to remove everything except Pete's database, next time I open up the mobile app, it's only just going to show me my stuff, and I'm done. That's inconveniently over your profile section at ComicBase.com. A perfectly valid question is, well, why the hell don't you have just a remove button in the app itself? Answer is because the Apple App Store guys wouldn't let me do it. They kept on rejecting the app because they didn't like it having a link to this to the function on the site. And that is one of the things that next time we go to submit a new version for the App Store, we have to see if we can bury that functionality in the program deep enough that the App Store review guys don't see it as some kind of insane violation of linking to sites or something. It's just never made any sense to me. It's a user convenience. That's just nuts. But now I'm just ranting. Okay, moving on. All right. Turn off optimize. Okay. You guys, a lot of times we'll be helping out folks on, setting up, remote sessions to help people out with stuff. And particularly if you've got an older computer, especially one with just an older hard drive, and man, especially if it's a laptop hard drive, because those are slow as dirt. Turn off the optimize function in the database and you will save yourself a ton of time getting in and out of the program. To do that, go under settings, go to preferences, and over here when it says optimize automatically when exiting, the default on that is when the unused space is greater than 10%. Just change that to never, and hit save. Let's talk about what optimizing is and what it isn't, and why it's probably not worth the time to do it anymore, at least not from within ComicBase. So what optimizing does is it basically goes through the database file itself and writes out, it orders the indexes. It does a lot of, vaguely good things that don't have a massive impact on performance, but they're not bad, but it writes a clean version of the file without any of the unused data in it anymore. One thing that's weird about databases is they don't, because they exist partially in disk, partially in memory. They only load up as much of themselves as they need at any given moment. Whenever you make a change to a database, it doesn't write a copy of the whole 2 gigabyte ComicBase database down to disk again, just to say just because you made a change something from 0 quantity to 1 quantity. That would be terrible. The performance would be miserable. No, what it does is it internally marks the old record that you had with the 0 quantity. It marks that as okay, that one's defunct. I'll write a new tiny record, just couple hundred bytes to the end of the file, which says, all right, here's the real record you want, and this is the one that says, no, I changed the quantity to 1. Now, that's fine when you change a lot of records, though, like when you download an update and it's changing thousands, sometimes tens or hundreds of thousands of things at once, your database can get very large. Because all that slack space that it was building up internally, that's tacking onto the back of the file, that kicks, it adds the file size quite a bit. So optimizing, one of the things that it did that's kind of nice is because it writes a clean file with nothing but the current stuff, you wind up with a kind of a nice compact version of your database. It's as small as it ever can be. So that's fine, but it's not worth doing anymore for most people. The reason is because, first of all, we used to need to do this hard when we were in prior to ComicBase 2020, because the old database engine we used to use was limited to 2 gigabytes. So in other words, if you had a database that ever tried to get bigger than 2 gigabytes, it would say, look, I can't do it. I can't write one more byte to this file, and everything will fail if you don't if you don't keep it under 2 gigabytes, because that was just a maximum file size limit. The database that we're using ever since ComicBase 2020 has no effective limit. It's the limit is it's like one of those stars in the sky kind of numbers. It basically comes down to however big your hard drive is, it's happy to do it. But just as importantly, it does a much better job of not of kind of like reusing its own slack space as it goes, so it doesn't balloon nearly as much as it used to. So it winds up being a much more subtle effect, of you don't need that optimized the way you used to. And then finally, if you're using Sidekick and you're letting it back up to the cloud, it's going to optimize anyway. It'll do it in the middle of the night when you're not watching. And so it's going to optimize before it sends your file over to us because we want to have the least amount of space used on our servers. So as a practical matter for most folks, just not worth doing. So do yourself a favor, turn it off in the setup. For the preferences for when you check, when you optimize when exiting. It's been the default to turn that off for a number of years now, but if you have it turned on, it used to be the default, it was turned on at 10% with versions, prior to 2020. And so your preferences will carry over. So if you have been using ComicBase for a number of years, you probably got that as your preference setting. But cut yourself a break, save yourself a minute or two exiting the program, and just turn that to never. You'll be just fine. You don't need it. All right. And let me see here. I've been yapping for a while, so it's always good to talk to the chat. All right, cool. All right. And let me see here. Okay, Oro says, TV, when graphs start going straight up, something else starts happening. Yeah, ideas. Not sure which of the graphs you're talking about. I think if you're talking about the talk about the number of variants, and I'll save that one. We talked about on the variant show. If I am talking about the thing you're talking about, or we did talk about why it had exploded over the years. Although David has a really good discussion of it as well, and he gets in from the financial side. The reasoning is compelling on the store and the publisher side, and honestly, they can get away with it, so they do. Is kind of why that particular graph went vertical. There's lots of other graphs that went vertical I could go into, but half of them has nothing to do with comic books. But anyway, all right, moving on. Okay, rebuilding indexes. All right, so while we're on the subject of making your ComicBase run fast, every once in a great while, there is somebody out there watching this who has got a database that is just dogging it. Their computer's fine, but their database is just running miserably. And the reason could be, if that's true, if your computer's otherwise fine, but your database is just really freaking slow, it could be that you've got some damage to one of your indexes. Now, there's a couple of things you can do in ComicBase that will make that better. But one that you want to do, and I'm not going to demo it right now. I'm just going to talk about it right now because I don't want to wait for the 2 minutes of dead air it will take to actually do what this is. But when you launch ComicBase, if you hold down the Control key and keep it held down on your computer, you may get prompted for a couple other things, but eventually you'll get prompted. Just keep that Control key held down, and you'll get prompted as to whether or not you want to rebuild the ComicBase indexes. If you say yes, it will go and it will basically drop all the indexes for all the tables in ComicBase and rebuild them all from scratch, in which case you will have perfectly wonderful, perfectly optimized indexes. And there's a good chance, if your indexes have been damaged and things weren't working right for you before, that suddenly you experience night and day performance differences in ComicBase. This doesn't happen often. Typically, the only time you'd see this is if it was the middle of doing some kind of rebuild or something like that, and somehow your computer crashed or just something really strange happened with your machine and it just left the index in kind of a garbage state. But if you do have that kind of problem, this will make a profound difference in how fast everything runs for you. So it doesn't hurt to try it. If you do, I would say if you do go ahead and do it, go ahead and let it rebuild the indexes. And also I'd say afterwards, go ahead and let it rebuild all the other things it's going to prompt you to rebuild, because it's nice to have a perfectly, organized copy of the database, with everything, as OCD as we know how to make it. Leave yourself 10-15 minutes for the whole shebang to get that all done if you want. But yeah, it's worth trying if you've been having that kind of trouble. The typical thing that would give this away that you have that kind of trouble is if you enter a single digit in a field and you tab onto the next field and it takes perceptible time to go out and update anything. If it takes, if it's any slower than just typing, then maybe there's something wrong and maybe this will help you. All right, on that thought, A lot of you people do know about this ones, but for those who don't, go into the File menu, go to File Tools, and there's a number of tools there for making things better in ComicBase, or forcing it to do some rebuilding in ways that will probably help certain things in your life. Now, we talked about Optimize already before, but the one I'm constantly going back to in one form or another is Rebuild Lists. What that does is there's a number of lists in ComicBase that typically they'd be kept up to date just by virtue of using the program and so forth. But just like it doesn't make sense sometimes to you don't want to save the whole database down to disk every time you change 1 byte in it, just like change one quantity from a 0 to 1. Well, same thing goes with like the list of was it 57,000 creators or something like that, or I think it's like, good Lord, I want to say it's like 1.6 million creator entries or something like that. There's like 57 creators listed and so forth. You don't want to go and try to reconstitute that list every time someone changes the spelling of one guy in one field, because you have the same problem where it's like if you sit there and you said it's James Tinian the Fourth IV, both capital IV is the fourth, as opposed to somebody just capitalized the I but not the V, right? If you make that correction in one part of the database, you don't want to go and try to seek out the other 1.6 million creator entries that might or might not have some variation of James Tinian the Fourth's name on them, and try to correct them at the same time, or see if you want to apply that or rebuild it. That would take insane amounts of time. It would make the entire program so sluggish no one would ever use it. But that said, there are times when you've done so many changes over time that it doesn't hurt to, when you've got some time, let it sift through the whole thing and clean stuff up. So the things that you can clean up using the file tools, you can choose one or more of the above. So the top one, series information, only takes a moment. It takes a minute or two on my machine to do this. Goes through all the different titles. It makes sure if there's any changes to capitalization or where the is put in and so forth. It any of the computable fields, it recomputes on those. The list of own series, this only takes a second or two to run, but basically you guys are probably seeing that you can filter the list of titles you're showing in ComicBase to show only the titles in stock or all titles. It is possible, if you're really, really clever how you do it, to change the quantity of the last issue of a title in ComicBase, and have like if you say, like, if you changed there's only one issue in your database and you change the quantity from a 1 to a 0, and depending on how the program shuts down, if you never exit the field but you then exit the program dramatically, it maybe didn't get a chance to mark the title as being in stock anymore before the program shut down. Weird things can happen in very weird edge cases, and they normally get recomputed as the program runs. But if you do want to force it to recompute those, this will let you mark those. It takes a second or two to run. It takes less time to run than it took me to explain. So it doesn't hurt to do that, but it probably won't change much. The ones that matter a lot, though: item information and the list of contributors, storylines, and notes. These are ones that will go through either the different notes fields, the appearance fields, the different creator fields, and so forth, and basically sort through them for as much dross as we can get rid of. Just erratic uses of punctuation, erratic uses of multiple spaces, redundant information, like saying the 1: of the Punisher versus first app the Punisher versus first appearance of the Punisher. We'll figure out that if you somehow put those in your notes, we'll figure out that those all really mean the same thing, and we'll change it to a single version, which is first appearance of the Punisher. There's about 100 other types of cleanup that we do to all the fields as we go throughout those ones. And so it doesn't hurt to do. I spent a very, very boring weekend this last weekend doing, among other things, and now I'm going to block on his name. Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. Apparently his name has been spelled about 18 different ways in ComicBase, because he writes a lot of stuff and he has a lot of diacriticals in his name, most of which are unfamiliar to the Americans doing the typing. And so, he also, he doesn't write, I believe he's an artist, but he appears in enough places that I think there are like 18 different variations on his name in one form or another that were in the database. At the very moment, through a lot of find and replace and a lot of use of the rebuild storylines, we got those down to just the one correct Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. And if you've done the rebuild of the contributors and storylines and so forth, it'll actually, as you type, by the time you get to the J-O and you start typing the S for Jose, it will suggest the proper spelling because it knows that the most popular use of his name is also the correctly spelled one now. That's the sort of thing that it actually helps to have done the rebuild on these things for from time to time, because it prioritizes the good data over just the cruft that inevitably gets into a database this large. So it tends to make it so that the good stuff, is easier to type than the bad stuff, and it tends to make it so that the database cleans itself over time. But it doesn't hurt to give it a little help once in a while and go ahead and run these things. So I'd say is, like I say, depending on your level of OCD-ishness, I don't know, once every 6 months, once a month, once every 2 days, whatever your level of crazy is. The first 4 in particular are worth running under the file tools here. The last one here, rebuilding the pictures lists, I'd say only do if you're having some kind of trouble downloading pictures, because that one basically goes through all the pictures in ComicBase and then all the pictures on your disk and figures out what the exact dimensions of every single picture are and downloads the dimensions into the database itself. So it can make things run ever so slightly faster as it's looking for pictures, but primarily I would only do that one if I had a lot of time on my hands or if I was having some kind of trouble downloading pictures. That would be the only time I'd touch that one personally. All right, that is file tools. All right, let's see here. Oh yes, Greg reminds yes. Jose Luis Garcia Lopez is indeed an artist. He's responsible for, among other things, the model sheets used by DC's licensees in the 70s and early 80s. One of DC's greats, absolutely. The number of credits on this guy was off the charts. I thought Jack Kirby drew a lot of stuff, and he did, but man, that guy's on a lot of stuff. I could not believe how involved the cleanup was to get him in there, because it just, at a certain point, it just became a thing. It was like I couldn't believe it was so hard to get all the different permutations done. And and what do you mean that there's a version of it where someone had put an accent over the I in Garcia? It's, yeah. Anyway, all right, enough about my life. Okay, adding movies and comics to ComicBase. All right, let's talk about this. This is one of the great hidden features of ComicBase that if you know it, it's cool as anything. If you don't know it, it'll blow your mind. So you may or may not have asked yourself what the heck this little comment that looks like this thing that looks like a play button is over here on the far left. And it is indeed, it's meant to look like a play button, but it's basically the media column. It's to say whether or not you have media for a given comic book. The idea is just like you can take any picture and drag it into a title and and add it as a picture. For instance, let's go ahead and show the picture for Gestalt over here. If you right click and say show the picture, it'll open up the corresponding file. All that is it's a picture called 0.jpg. I'm going to drag it out for a second. If I'm allowed to. Sorry, I'm working off of a common server, so might be a little harder to do than I think. Of course it is. All right. No, sorry, but that's what I get for working on our production server, as I don't have the permissions to pull it out. But if I'd pulled that out and gone forward and back on the tiles, you'd see the thumbnail go away. I could then demo, dragging it back in again by just dragging 0.jpg on here, and boom, there the picture would appear. Well, similarly, you can add your own digital assets to a title. So, and these can include, but are not limited to, the digital versions of the comic book. They could be PDFs, they could be CBRs, they could be CBZs, which is, I guess, a CBR that's been zipped. But they also could be things like movies, M4Vs, MOVs, or even, and this one I really dig, URL links. So, for instance, let me go ahead and pull up Let's go looking for a movie trailer. Let me go over to YouTube. And I'm just going to go ahead and sign out. Okay, so here's YouTube. And let's look for, I don't know, let's look for the Darkman trailer. You guys might remember this one. I believe it's Liam Neeson. By the way, I just saw a movie last night. Was not bad at all. Called Unknown with Liam Neeson from, I think, from early 2000s. Worth checking out if you haven't seen it. But let's go to Darkman in ComicBase. All right, and I think there might have also been a Darkman movie special as well. But good enough. All right, let's just say Darkman Volume 1. All right, so this is an adaptation of the movie. Here is the movie trailer. So if we go here, there we are. And I'm gonna play.
They destroyed everything he had.
So I don't get the copyright struck on this one. All right, look up here where that YouTube trailer is right there. If I go and I drag this down to my desktop, it's going to make a little URL folder, a little .url thing. Well, the same rules apply. If I just give it the same name as an issue, which is, I'll call it 1. Now, if I look at it in, with all the file extensions showing, it's really called something like 1.url. But I can actually now take that, drag it onto here, and then suddenly you'll see that this little media icon lights up, and suddenly I've got that thing linked to my copy of ComicBase. So now, if I go to Darkman, I just click on it, it just instantly pulls up the associated media.
No foolish heroics, if you please.
So you can do this for Comicraft files. You can do this for digital files, for CBZs, CBRs, etc. But yes, you can associate all kinds of digital media with your ComicBase database, and it doesn't even need to be on your hard disk. So all you need is the link itself, and it'll take you straight there. So anyway, that's pretty cool. Hope you enjoy it. All right. And let's see here. Going off here, I think we got time for a few more. Okay, getting better looking labels. All right. This is one. If you guys have ever used ComicBase to print labels, they do a great job, but your printer might not be kicking them out in quite the way that you would think. So for instance, if I go and I want to print an identification label here for Darkman, I print my labels on a Dymo label writer, 450, whatever else. I'm just going to go ahead and preview it. And in theory, that label would look like that, right? Now, of course, in reality, a Dymo 450 is a black and white printer, and so it's going to, have black and white versions of this thing right here, and that barcode is going to be, it is what it is. Now, if you just install a Dymo printer and use the default settings, it is fast as all get out. I mean, it prints like, bam, those labels just kick right out. The problem is they look a little rough. The edges on the fonts aren't great. The half toning it uses to simulate color is really blocky. And honestly, it isn't anything like what it could be. The way to get it to be everything it can be is go in to the printer preferences, because this is something that is beyond ComicBase's ability to drive. You really need to go into the preference for the printer itself. But so let's go to my printers and scanning. This is in Windows. Pull this over to the screen that whoops, those are my notes for the show. Pull it over here. Here's my Dymo label printer. Go down here to the printing preferences right down there, and then have a look at, you might need to hit advanced for this one, but have a look at these guys right here. The default on these thermal printers is going to be 300 by 300 dots per inch. Change that to the 300 by 600. Just importantly, change the print quality to, instead of text only, change it to barcodes and graphics. And the print density, if you feel like it's printing a little light, a little heavy, you can change that depending on your label stock. But those are the big ones, is changing the print quality and and the half toning right there. And the half toning, you want photo quality, not anything else. So if you do that, you'll notice two things will happen immediately. One is your labels will print a lot slower. Instead of kicking out, like 1 per second, it'll take a couple, 3 seconds to print each label. It's more than fast enough for anything we've ever done, but they will look a lot better. Your text will be much smoother. The thumbnails it prints out will be much more useful, because it'll actually be able to simulate more shades of gray. That's the one thing I really, again, the only thing I could really wish that would be better on a Dymo label printer, other than eventual fading, is, man, if they could ever find a way to print them in color, that would be amazing, because you can get your eye can pick out more detail with a spot of color than it can with sheer resolution, by far. But this gives you much more tones to deal with. So when you're looking at the label on something and trying to figure out what variant it is or something like that, it makes it much easier to figure out what's what. That's something you have to do in the preferences for the printer itself. So whatever printer you're printing to, and the same thing applies whether it's, you've got an inkjet, whether you've got a laser writer, but very much if you've got any kind of thermal printer, go into those printer preferences and make sure that you're using like the best settings you can possibly do for those labels, and it will make a huge difference. All right, let's see how we're doing here. Okay. Okay, and Tim asked where ComicBase Media is stored, and Steve's already answered him, so at least I knew enough to look on that one. Okay, and there we go. All right, that is. Oh, and Aura says that's a good question. If you have. Not the actual movie. Yes, when I'm dragging a web link on there, the only thing that gets saved into that file is this little tiny. It's like a couple bytes web link on here. If I right click and I say Show Media File in Explorer, it'll show you where that is. This thing is like 1 kilobyte. It's really it's 69 bytes long, and if you were to open this file up with a text editor, you'd find out that literally all it is the URL itself, and it's encoded as you call it an internet shortcut. It's like a .url file, or sometimes depending on the browser, it's a .web file. But the Microsoft doesn't like showing you its real name under normal circumstances, but we'll deal with it no matter what it is, and they are tiny. Okay, and I think that catches me up on that one. All right, let's see what we're doing here. Okay, saving reports as PDFs. We get this one a lot. It's another one having to do with printers in a way, and so we don't have a direct way to make this a little bit more evident, but I'll go ahead and show it anyway. So let's say I want to go and I want to make a collection report. So I'm just going to go ahead and print we'll print a issue checklist for Darkman Volume 1. All right, so here's an item checklist, and let's say I want to save this as a PDF. Now, you got a couple ways you can do it. Up here on the upper right, you can print, and you can choose your printer. Now, if you've got something like Adobe PDF chosen, or Microsoft XPS document writer, or Microsoft Print a PDF, by all means, just go ahead and choose that. When you print, it'll ask you for a file name, and anything you print will then become a PDF file, and you could go that way. If you don't have one of these specialized print drivers on your machine, no matter what it is, so let's say I'm just going to go to my regular printer, which is it's an HP, which I just had here a second ago, Joiner, my HP laser printer. Another way to get there is if you go and you preview right up under here, and it's going to bring up, here's the issue checklist for Darkman. I own none of these issues, at least not in this database, and so it's leaving me blanks for what the condition, quantity, and cost will be of the one that I buy. But it shows you what what's important about them, what their numeric value is, and so forth. If you look up here at the very, very top left, export, and it's got a terrible icon. I mean, I wish I could zoom in so you could see the true horror of this icon, because it's like it's like a rectangle with an arrow coming off of it. It's the only way I could describe it. But if you say export report and then immediately skip past the default thing that Crystal Reports gives you, because exporting as a Crystal report, I don't know, unless you're Crystal themselves is not useful, but the second item down here is useful, which is save it as a PDF. Then, even if you don't have one of these specialized print drivers, you can save it as a PDF format there. Crystal Reports does have their own PDF export built in. I'm going to save that on my desktop so it's easy to find. Takes a second, generates the whole thing, and then I'm going to go out to my desktop. I'll drag it over here so you can see that it really did something. There's the darkman.pdf it just made. I double click on it. It, of course, opens on the wrong window, on the other wrong screen, and there's my PDF. So that's two different ways you can save a PDF of anything from within ComicBase. Now, you might not want to save PDFs of things. A lot of times it isn't so much that you want to carry them around or ship them off to the people like there. For a lot of other things, the mobile report is the way I would go for reporting. You would just, if you want to save reports of particular things and you just want to have them ready for, for viewing when you're on the road. If you have the Pro or Archive editions of ComicBase, I typically will go ahead and just go, under whatever report I'm looking to do here. Let me go ahead and make that same report. I'd say print let's do a price list this time. You can either print out on real paper, which would be what would happen if I had print, or if you have the mobile versions, you can either save them to web, which you'll see them available throughout the app, or I can export them in HTML format and carry them on whatever I want. Those are two other ways of going for that sort of thing. All right. Let's see here. Okay, I think that is the quick. Oh, and Tim says, if you have a movie file and add it, then the movie gets stored in the media file. That is correct. Yes. So if you have MOVs, M4Vs, M4A, I think it does audio files. I'm not sure. There's a really long list of media types it'll do, but I want to say Wave and M4As are some of the files it'll do as well, because I think there was some interest, especially back in the day, of being able to store audio programs of things like old time comic books that got done up as radio shows, and I think that those are files I think it supports M4As and WAVs, but I know for sure it supports M4Vs, which is another wrapper for those kind of audio files. So anyway, but there's I think there's about 11 or 12 different file types that it'll support to drag on. When in doubt, drag it on there, and if it takes it, it supports it. Okay. All right. And then I think the last thing I wanted to get into, and then I want to go off and have a beer, darn it, is barcode entry on the phone. And this is almost like a negative tip. It's a weird one because I'm going to tell you, don't use a feature that's in ComicBase. So, I'll admit, I struggle sometimes when that you do something that it's a cool feature for what it is, and it's a really bad feature if you if you oversell it, right? And one of those things like that, it's a curse, is the barcode entry through the mobile app. So if you have the mobile app, you'll probably know that you can launch it, and what it's meant for is it's meant for entering things on the road. So we're doing quick lookups of stuff like, hey, I see a comic book, I'm not sure what it is. It's one of the 87 variants of Amazing Spider-Man number, 6 series number 1 or whatever. Beep its barcode, it'll pull it up, it'll tell you, okay, this is what's going for, this is what is important about the coverage. So, and for that purpose, the barcode entry on the phone is cool. It just is. It's a neat tech trick. The problem we get is that a lot of people confuse the fact that your phone is capable, if you can keep your phone steady enough, if you've got a good phone and it doesn't have too much smudging on it, and when you hold the comic book at the same time, it's capable of entering your comic books that way. It's a little thunky, but it can be done. But oh my goodness, it's nowhere near as fast. It's just getting out a barcode scanner and just beeping them through. I mean, it's like 8 times slower. I've last time we measured it, I think it came out like it was on a order of magnitude of being an order of magnitude slower, but I think the actual number was like 8 times slower than doing it with a real barcode scanner. So I guess what I'm saying is, guys, the barcode scan on the phone is cool, use it for what it's worth, which is occasional entry, but you're setting yourself up for frustration if you think I'm going to sit down there with a box of, a long box of comic books and get through it on a barcode, and with my phone as my barcode scanner, as opposed to getting a real barcode scanner or doing it some other way. I mean, there's lots of ways to enter the books in the database, but man, I would not recommend to anybody I loved to try to enter large amounts of comic books using any kind of phone-based app. It's just, just the mechanics of how a phone has to image stuff, and because your phone, based on what your phone's doing right now, is probably taking like a 24 megapixel image, trying to account for your handshakes, doing all this insane straightening out. It's trying to do all the stuff with every fiber of its being in order to get a barcode image out of it that probably has 16 bytes of information out of it. It's crazy how much data it's throwing out, and in order to get what's done. A real barcode scanner like this guy, the reason it's so fast, the reason it's so error proof, is because it doesn't care about color. It doesn't care about anything except the spacing between barcodes, barcode bars. It is not trying to do anything other than that, and so it's really, really good at its job. The fact that you can miraculously push a phone to do that job doesn't mean you should. One's really not a great replacement for the other. So I guess I'd say that, guys, if you're thinking about using that as your main source of entering in large amounts of comic books, please don't. You'll frustrate it, and then you'll call us up and you'll be mad at us because you'll be like, "Hey, but you said I could do it." And it's like, "Yes, it can do it, but please don't." So anyway, that's my last anti-tip of the time. All right, guys. Last thing I gotta say, and this is the most important thing I'll be saying this entire live stream, is this is Thanksgiving. This is the most overlooked holiday on the American calendar, except maybe Arbor Day. It's we are getting a point now in the sales season that everyone's always in, where we barely even do. Halloween. What can you not like about Halloween? You can buy costumes, you can buy candy, you can buy all this cool decorations, but even Halloween is getting crowded out by Christmas. Christmas is the big sales thingy of the entire universe, and it wants to crowd everything else in its thing, and poor Thanksgiving just gets shoved to the curb. I guess Thanksgiving in America is 401 years old this year. It was instituted into law by Abraham Lincoln, but it's profoundly an American holiday in that it's there to honestly just celebrate what's good in your life and say thank you to to God and to all the people who've made your life worth living. This is something we shouldn't forget. It's easy to do, man, because we're all rushing about trying to deal with it. Things are much sexier, and it's not sexy to stop and just say thanks, but it's something that really needs to be said. And this is something where I want to say to all y'all is I only get to do what I do because of all you folks. I am so thankful that you guys have supported us through all these years, that you let me live this life, as crazy as this life gets, with infinity variants and all the other nonsense that goes into comic books. I've gotten to, for 30 years now, I've gotten to run a software company, trying to help the world catalog its comic books. And it's all because you guys are willing to support us with your time and effort and your money. And this is a day I'm not trying to sell you a darn thing. Matter of fact, I'm going to say the opposite. If you're thinking about buying ComicBase today, for God's sake, don't. Because there's probably going to be a time very, very shortly, because I'm not immune to the sales season, where you can buy it a little cheaper. Not today. But not today, not tomorrow. Anyway, this is just a time for me to say thanks. So with that, guys, thank you all for attending, and hope you guys have a joyous time with your families, and I wish you all a great Thanksgiving. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.